Hi, folks, and thank you for watching another episode of A Voice for Treasures from the Past. And on this video, if you're watching it on YouTube, you might have seen the thumbnail, kind of give you a hint what happened here. Now, I've been saying I'm going to move on to something else and have other art that I've had for years, and I just want to get to them. I feel like I want to tell their story. But this one, I think that most folks uh, could imagine anyway. It's kind of outweighs my other uh, pieces, and this discovery is pretty amazing, pretty surprising. So, if you're watching it on YouTube, you probably saw the thumbnail, and it does indicate, of course, that I'm certain I found the fourth um, face of these figures. That's Odilon's known works. Of course, if you've seen my previous videos, you know the details. If you haven't, this is a small lithograph with the signature of Odilon Redon on it. Uh, and I just had gone through a series of videos of just true discovery of what was within this piece. So um, I want to go ahead and just go through them now. And it might be a little bit more difficult for folks looking at it, at home or out there, in that because of the high resolution scans that I have and all that I'm able to do. But uh, I can assure you, when I'm pointing these out, and maybe someday this will come out a little more formally. I've got ideas, and hopefully there'll be other folks that are involved that can take it that last couple percent in its journey of coming out to the world. So anyway, I'm going to show you what you folks watching, um, what I found, and how they match up, and there's with and I want to start with the figures that are a little more subjective. Wow, I think there's really nothing subjective about what I'm going to show you, but there's clarity, uh, different degrees of clarity, uh, some of which I can see because I'm expanding them on a big screen and looking at all the details. So the artifacts that I'm seeing are clear. There's no question on that. So it may be harder, like I said, to see it from your perspective, but I think you'll get the idea. So really, um, the I think maybe at a glance, the most difficult one figure, and I was saying face, and using the term face in these figures, but as it turns out, and this I want to show as well, that there's more than just the face on these. It's not just the head. There's more to it, and there's artifacts throughout it. So I'm gonna go through it as quick as I can. I'm gonna show you here, and I'm gonna start with the one that was the newest. And I said on my last video, I said that fourth figure, given that the three are pretty clearly there, um, the fourth one's got to be there. So I started focusing on 1890s, 1880s, 1890s, the noirs. Of course, it makes sense where these faces, these figures were in the in his history of works, and even looking at the ones that had the monogram on them to kind of tie it in. So that said, I did find one, and I found it, I believe. I mean, this is I guess, the least, or the most bit of potential argument that somebody may have. Say, no, that's not it. Okay, well, I think it's going to find it is. So, started looking, and I'm looking at the eyes closed, right? Another of one of the four of the most iconic pieces, works done by Odilon Redon, and it kept drawing me back. And it looked that particular face on eyes closed. I hope I'm saying that right. Closed eyes closed. You'll know if you know Odilon Redon. It seems like it's almost similar in a few of his known works, but this one really, it was this jawline. I'm like, where is I gotta find a square jaw, because a lot of them were very triangular and such. So if you'll notice here, it's a very flat and square jawline here. So I looked at it in detail. The his known work, um, Closed Eyes, and started looking at it. And interesting enough, again, I'm not an expert per se, but I've done a ton of research on lithographs and art and this and that. Anyway, there's a reversal piece to it. Some of them, some optical, some lithographic, stone reversals, plates, things like that. I really don't know all the details on that. What I do know is that when I turned or mirrored uh, that particular piece and talked it at a certain specific degree, guess what? Almost unarguable. And here's some of the points I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in this piece reversed. So I think everything you'll see on various museums and gallery, whatever, works online, it's going to be reversed. But when I turned it the other way, interestingly enough, you may see that while it's different and much like one of the other characters that I've already shown, we'll talk about that in a minute. It is it is really that's the one. And there's artifacts that I can see very magnified, probably impossible, very difficult to get from a video that I'm showing and then try to do the same that I'm doing. But anyway, if we look here, pardon me, um, you can see that just watch that come into play. And this one, again, if you look here, we'll just leave it there for a minute. The hairline coming down and then the hairline coming here. If you look at how it brings comes back into the this particular lithograph, it is again almost as if it's as if it's just cut off in a way, or you uh, well, it continues. It's like an artifact. You can see that. There's one particular place on this that kind of sums it up. And here's what's interesting. I was trying to find the artifact or the identical matching uh, uh, evidence amongst the two to tie it together. Now, if you look at the known work of Odilon Redon'S, well, if you just disregard the top of the face here, um, look at the jawline here, and this I found to be very interesting. You see this sharp corner here? This little corner does not seem natural. If you were to, if one were to draw a face, why would you put this odd triangular bit here? It almost seems as if you would just bring it down to a facial algorithm. But that said, this particular known work has this odd little triangle. So it's almost like in hindsight, or as we look at this now, it was possibly trying to cover or extend over to marry up with this. And I'll show you why that's interesting. You see that convergence or trans transparency over the top here. It is exactly that little point right there. And the cheek line and everything. There are some artifacts here with the shading and such. Okay. Again, I'm kind of going, okay, well, we have three of the other figures. So I really hope I'm not trying to prove this per se, because in so many words, because I hope those of who watch this and who are watching this recognize that when you have one, two, three other figures, the odds of having the fourth, right? So we kind of know, but again, if you follow, just like if I were to cut that off right there and just picture this, you would be there would be no difference. You would see it and you would go, oh, wow, that's the same drawing because it strangely goes out to this little corner here. It comes up. Even more interesting to me is while I'm going through this research, hoping that the last 2% will happen one day, um, is that what came first, right? So in my mind, I'm trying to be very scientific about it, very realistic and very, just allowing it to happen. I'm not trying to force it anyway. Now, by sharing this information, I hope I've had comments before, and we've talked about that, that folks think maybe I'm trying to sway this. I don't know what to tell you. Those that said that, because I'm just showing what's going on here. That said, how do I figure out? Some experts on Odilon's, how he did his works back then, and proofs versus originals versus the original proofs, and then maybe some redone the works that were redone as individuals, which it looks like is what's happened here. Which one came first? That's like, so it's been kind of nagging at me. Like, was this done after? And it was like, hey, let's make all these bodies with these figures that I've already done in singles. It doesn't make sense there, but that, I have to concede that, or recognize that's a possibility. But when I look at something like this, my opinion is, and I think logically is, why would you make this face all out of a human kind of figure, to make that corner right there on the closed eyes version if you weren't already working with a stone or a proof? And again, I don't know how that was done. But it almost seems as if this fraternity was done as a proof, and then this particular piece was done, um, after the fact, because this particular point right here does not seem like normal anatomy. You would probably just bring the face down like that. So what is that? Why is that? Well, to me, it tells me that this was after the fact and such. So that's the exciting fourth find. I think it's pretty clear that it's very unlikely this portion could have been accidentally done the same. It's one of the same. It's associated, whether it was before, after, whether eternity is a proof, and these were done after. To me, logically, it makes sense. Scholars, folks, hopefully someday again, the last 2%. All right, but move on. I'll try to get quicker on these other ones because I don't want this to go too long. So now, if we go to probably the one that's more different than, or the next most different than what the known work is, right? Is this one here, this particular figure in Fraternity. Now, I already made a video on a very short one because I was in shock. Gonna be honest with you. I didn't even say anything. I just showed it sliding back and forth. So, sorry. Anyway, here's what we got here. I kind of recognized that it looked the same. It was likely. And in that period of time, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to start looking at the whole known picture, drawing, compared to Fraternity, to this lithograph, and see what else is in there, because it may not just be the face. I started seeing more below the head and blue. Okay, so this is a really cool one. So this would be, of course, and you might have saw this one. I'm going to bring it in. Um, this is Cyclops. And what I find interesting about this is that a kind of evidence that I'm going to roll with here, in my opinion, my logic. Okay, I've done a lot of work on this, and again, this uh, the face on Cyclops is a different orientation. If this was a straight photographic copy or something of that nature, why would the face be turned? The face is at a different angle. And I had said, boy, that sure looks like maybe Cyclops at a different angle, orientation. And then that's when I went, wait a minute. After a few days, I was like, man, let's start putting this over these larger sections of these works and see what happens. And wow, yeah. So take a look at this. So if you're familiar with Cyclops, and I'm sure folks that know Odilon and love Odilon are, if you were to take a look just to say, wow, is this potentially the same thing? Or based on this figure in fraternity? Well, take a look at the arm. What has looked like a rock for probably 100 years. I don't know how long are we talking, more than 120 years. How long has it been? So folks have been looking at Cyclops and wondering what's below it. Well, we know what's below it in Cyclops, but in fraternity and in Cyclops, you've got this what looks like a rock. But if you look at fraternity, follow this arm line right here, and it goes right up and over. Almost looks like that was an arm hanging off of, but I think what may have happened, this is an assumption, but clearly those lines do not match up by chance. So that is like maybe a, hey, let's use this and make it into, just take care of those lines and make that into a stone, a rock. Again, now if you watch, this is kind of where I got enlarged it, not enlarged it, but used a larger section of Cyclops, and I started seeing, of course, the back follows, and I am certain that some folks have seen this, already looked at this and went, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that whatever your opinion is on it, is folks are seeing stuff hopefully before I am." Because apparently I'm pretty slow at this. It's taken me an awful long time to go through all the scientific steps that I thought was the right direction to go, which all came out check, 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 check. Then I finally look at the work itself and I kind of chuckle because in the art world, I've heard over the years and a few times, and I'm not a professional, but I've heard this, it's very common. Um, Never look at the signature. Never do that. Always look at the work itself. So I'm going through all this other stuff, and I'm glad I did because it really led me down that path. I'm going to call it up the path. It led me up this path, and then I go look at the figures. I'm like, oh my god, they're Odilon's work. So this was classic and really exciting. So anyway, if you look at this, a lot of fun here. This pretty the back line you can actually see in the I believe is this an oil on canvas, I think, by Odilon Redon'S of Cyclops. I think that's the work that's known. But anyway, in that you can see down here on the back line how it. I think I'm beating a dead horse on this one. I hate to use that term, but it really is pretty much. I mean, you can even see here, um, if you might see the darkening here, the shading in fraternity, and then you can see it like as a triangle, the neckline. It's so I mean I would say again as a whole it's pretty obvious, but I'm trying to go in the from the least exact to the more exact. So kind of the you know undeniable, let's call it that. But I think this reaches that. I really find it really fascinating that the arm here in fraternity is turned into a rock and the lines match up perfectly. Very, very amazing. I do. Okay, so I'm gonna just go on to the next one and then I'll throw some comments out there and my opinions and so on. Uh, let's see here if I can get that going. All right, so the next one and the next two were the ones that I saw and were just like, well, there's no question, right? I was sitting there on these videos going, this is the same, folks. So there we go. Let's take a look at. But I did use a larger image of these. Well, at least the Satan plate, because on the figure you really can't, because that's all that's imaged is the head, with additional figures in there, but they're clearly not in fraternity. So the Satan plate from Flowers of Evil. Um, this was my second find, essentially, of wow, what's in there. And so I've done a full video on that, I think, or a decent one. But I'm going to go just show you, folks, with a larger uh, perspective here. And as you can see, it's the same figure There are indeed artifacts that I can see, and even larger. So up in here, when I take the whole, most all of this plate, Satan plate, I can see, I believe, at the highest magnification, I can see some in the wings of the Satan figure, or evil figure, whatever. Believe that's what we call it. I can see a few lines of this particular um, uh, uh, figure here. So in fraternity. So again, they're associated. I don't know how the process is done from a proof to these individuals, and that's what I assume is going on here, just because of the things I'm talking about. Um, so again, I'm going to go back, and there are some lines that are very dark. So I'm not going to really spend too much time on it. You can see them uh, clearly, fairly clearly. Like you see these lines coming up from fraternity here. Some of these lines transition right into the arm and different things, and you can see them when you really get this thing isolated on that figure. So there we go on that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to leave that like that. Um, so, a big part of what I'm trying to figure out is, of course, until hopefully someday, I mean, I think this thing's important enough to where it will one day be evaluated for the final throws. The final 2%, I call it, because I think everything else is there. I don't know what else you would need, really. So the final 2% is the toughest part, and that's going to be the high scientific, highly things I can't do, and things we can't just look at and compare or use tools that are highly sophisticated now, but we have access to them. So that said, okay, so we know we have Cyclops. We know we have Satan plate from Flowers of Evil. We likely and clearly have what looks to be now. There may be, as far as the closed eyes, there might be, maybe there's another version of it that's like more angled down, or better match, but the jawline fits so perfectly and so unusually perfect because of that odd triangular piece. I don't believe there would be. Maybe there is, but I think again it was a proof. I believe that this was used as the proof, and things were modified by Odilon Redon. So the last one, of course, and it was the first one that really tipped me off on comparing his works. I mean, I was thinking, I don't want to do I'm getting to the point where I've done all this handwriting and this and that, and I don't want to get to the point where I got to look at pencil strokes, because that's so subjective. But I didn't consider that the actual figures were in this work. I did not know that. So the minute I started peeling these out of there, I was like, oh my goodness, this thing is just I yeah. So anyway, we know from looking at one of my videos, I know people have been looking at that one, and I'll just show it again. And this one here is the first one that I personally saw, and it has the hairband lines up to the image here on Fraternity. I'm calling them artifacts, and because I believe they were made by the same at the same time, same process. I don't know how you take the proof and how you move that, onto singles, individual pieces, but the artifacts are there between them, so they're related. um, so I've already done a video on that. The eyes, it's the head of figure. And here's what's okay. There we go. Some of Odilon Redon'S most iconic figures are in this lithograph. So where does that leave this? Well, okay. So I've been doing the research piece that I know there's scholars and people of Odilon Redon about that know far more, but I know Malario's 1913 um, catalog on Odilon. What he did as a big key to his works, Odilon's works, and I have access to, it's I've looked through it. It's in French. I've translated a lot. Um, there's two in here, the Satan plate, right? And the eyes closed eyes. Um, those two are both in that uh, particular 1913 publication. Um, I don't believe the figure is in there, nor is Cyclops. Not that particular version of Cyclops. There is a Cyclops in Malario's 1913 publication, but it's a totally different uh, figure. So, okay. So I hope I'm looking at this in a couple ways, and I hope folks that are listening and watching me go through this understand I'm trying to be very well. I've been very excited. I've had some ups and downs on it. I had some folks that I contacted that initial way back. It's kind of almost steer me off. Said, the Odilon Redon'S works were never like this. Like they didn't do figures. He didn't do figures like this. I don't know if they were trying to poke at me and laugh at me because honestly, and 6, 8 months later, I'm like, they're all in there. Maybe that was that. And a few other negative things, and I guess that's to be expected. I mean, folks don't have this in their hand like I do. They don't know me from Adam, and they don't know what this is, and so there we go. Um, uh, so that said, um, I find it really uh, kind of a amazing thought that this potentially, this particular lithograph, which I believe to be a proof, in my opinion, numbers kind of match up just like I've been going through the whole analysis process over all these videos over months. It's all adding up. I remember me saying before I even knew these figures were in here that it has all the hallmarks. Well, boy, did I really realize it really had the hallmarks right here in these faces. And that's the amateur that didn't you know non-professional that didn't know that. Boy, look at the works, and you'd have seen them in front of you. It probably jumped me a little faster, I guess, to where I'm at, where I feel I'm at the 98% point. That said, who wondered over these decades and decades and decades and century or whatever? Maybe it's been that long. Who wondered what was below this particular Cyclops, and the painting that of this particular figure that has, I believe, a woman below it. It's a different perspective size, but you know, where did that Cyclops? What? Wow! If this is the proof of plate, or whatever you would call that, we know it was this particular figure, and he used that portion of it to create that. And I hope it brings more, not necessarily value, because I mean I know Dylan's he's got some pretty valuable stuff, but I think value in the way of answering questions. This might answer a lot of questions. I hope it doesn't answer questions actually, I'm not even going to say that. I know it's going to answer questions that some people don't want to hear. Maybe I don't know, but all I can say is that this is it's you see what it is, and it's very good likelihood, right, that it shows what the Cyclops that's known work by Odilon. I believe it's just one. That's it. So, um, and then um, eyes closed. So I believe there's several variations. Malario mentions in that publication. There's various uh, versions of it back then. And But that said, this could answer where that face came from. And I know so there we go. The Satan plate, flowers of evil. Where did that figure come from? Well, it either this came from it, or these individuals came from this fraternity lithograph. And again, the square jaw hovering, trying to stretch the jaw on closed eyes around. in my interpretation of that to try to clarify or align to that jawline, it makes me believe that it was already fraternity and closed eyes was kind of being adjusted around it. And that is an opinion. Logical kind of thing, but doesn't mean it's right. I'm just saying. Um, Cyclops, obviously, awesome. And then interesting figure. Uh, where'd the head come from? The floating head that's being held by a wing. You know, well, it sure looks like maybe a figure came from this lithograph as a proof or something of that nature. Now, there's Malario does in his 1913. It does mention different proofs that were done, made, and such, and regarding flowers of evil figures. And I think what the two here are in flowers of evil, I believe. Um, were these intended to be in flowers of evil? Was this all flowers of evil proof set, and then it went a different route with these two? I don't know, but that is that's all I have. I hope that's enough. So, I think it might be enough for just about anybody, and it certainly is enough for me and for now. And like I said, I keep saying I'm going to be done, and I keep finding things. I don't know what else I can find. I just don't at this point. So what I can do, this really put the icing on the cake, and I I still have I've had a few I've contacted or made contact with a few groups that showed interest and that they would be interested in looking at it. I'm being very cautious with this because um, I just yeah, and I think it's kind of some of the shell shock from some of the comments I got when a year I don't even know how many months ago I put it on, and people there were some I just I don't know if I don't know who to trust. Maybe that's the idea. I don't know who to trust, but I know that when I can show the public and I can show what it is, what's in there with all these figures and faces, and give my opinion. And then all the darn scientific analysis I did up to this point, which is just unbelievable steps that I didn't even know would come into up to this moment. So that said, um, those are the four iconic figures of Odilon Redon'S works, four of them, all in one spot, all in a lithograph. So I that's all I can do. That's all I can say right now. And I uh, wish everybody a happy New Year. And I hope I make a video someday of this where we've done a little bit, kind of that last 2%. Let's just say. So I hope so. But I hope this answers some questions for the millions of people out there that are interested in his works, and this might answer questions to scholars and even more, so about where they came from and things like that. So thanks again for watching, and see you next year.